everybody. How we doing? Good, good, good. Good to see you. Some of you came in, got your ice cream before. You're going to do it again after, aren't you? Yep. Joel, where's Joel? Joel already hit it one time. He's going to hit it again, right? Yeah, I love it. All right. Hey, glad you're here with us today. Thanks for hanging out with us this morning. Real quick before we get to the message, if you actually read the emails we send every week that we work really hard on to send to you, a couple of weeks ago we had a little staff update. We've hired a couple of new staff members here. Emily Gage has come on staff full-time to be our Next Step director, and in that also helping us a little bit with our Love Nova nonprofit. So we're excited to have her here. And then also Clay Sims. Clay and his family have been here a couple of years. He is getting his master's in ministry. So we've brought him on as our Journey Teens resident. So he's overseeing Journey Teens for us throughout the rest of this year. So we're excited to have Emily and Clay with us. If you know them, make sure you stop, say thank you, congratulate them. We have a great staff team and are very happy to add those two to that team. All right? All right, do me a favor. If you like to fish, raise your hand right now. Let's go. Raise those hands high. Okay, everybody else, look at those people. Liars, right? Anglers are the biggest liars in the world. I went fishing. That fish was like this long, about this big, every single time. Those are the stories you hear from people who love to fish. With that kind of in mind, I want to tell you my own fish story, all right? This is pre-ministry, pre-being married. I was a volunteer at a church, and I was helping with a week of camp for the church camp and for high school students. The high school students went to bed on this particular night, and so I grabbed my fishing pole because there was a really nice lake at this camp that the camp was actually built around. And I thought, well, I'm going to go out and I'm going to go fishing a little bit. I'll just be honest, I don't really ever catch any fish when I go fishing, but I just kind of like getting out and just not have anybody else around, just kind of decompressing there beside the water. Well, it's nighttime, so I have a top water lure. And it's one of those things that kind of floats on the water. It's got a little spinner, makes a bunch of noise. It's shiny, so a fish sees it and hopefully will attack it, and then you can catch a fish. This particular evening, I'm out there. There's this concrete wall that goes down into the water, and I'm at the corner of this piece of the lake, and I'm fishing up against this wall. Now, again, I'm not expecting to catch anything, but like my fourth cast out, all of a sudden I hear this sucking sound, and I don't hear my lure anymore, and I feel this incredible tug on my reel. I'm like, I got a fish. And so I try to set the hook on this fish, and I start reeling it in, and this fish is pulling pretty hard. I'm like, oh, this is a lot bigger than the ones I'm used to catching. So I'm trying to get this fish in. There's this one moment where this fish actually jumps out of the water, kind of a cool thing if you've ever fished before. Now, where this camp is, there's nobody, okay? There's no city close by, no ambient light. The closest city is like Danville, and it's like 8 miles away, Danville, Virginia. And so the only light that maybe you have is if there's a full moon out. That particular night, there's a full moon. This fish jumps out of the water. I see the water just glistening off its scales, and I can kind of get an idea like this is a really big fish. But now I got to get it to shore. So I'm fighting this thing for a little bit. And finally, somehow, I don't understand how this happened, I get it to this rocky area. There's a bunch of rocks. I get it on top of the rocks, okay? But right when I do, the lure comes out of its mouth. I'm like 10 to 15 feet away trying to get there as fast as I can because I see it there, again, glistening in the moonlight. I'm like, I'm going to get there and grab this fish. This is the biggest fish I've ever caught. This is amazing. This fish does like a 1 in a million flop and flops right back into the lake, never to be seen again. Now, you get to decide whether that story is true or not, okay? I'm telling you it's true. We just didn't have phones back then to take photos of it. But this is like the biggest fish I think I've ever caught in my entire life. It was huge. It really was probably about 8 pounds. But anyway, today we're going to talk about some fish that didn't get away as we continue the series called Down by the Water. But before we get there, don't forget to turn in your photos. This is probably actually the same size fish I caught that night. It just felt like it was 8 pounds. This is our son Jake many years ago. He's a lot bigger and taller now. But hey, if you've got photos, make sure that you are sending them in, social@thejourneynova.org or at thejourneynova on Instagram. We're going to do something fun with those at the end of the series. And you've done a great job sending them in. Keep doing that, all right? All right, let's get back to where we are today. Luke chapter 5 is where we're going to spend all of our time this morning, starting with verse 1. One day as Jesus was preaching on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, Great crowds pressed in on him to listen to the word of God. He noticed two empty boats at the water's edge, for the fishermen had left them and were washing their nets. Stepping into one of the boats, Jesus asked Simon, its owner, to push it out into the water. So he sat in the boat and taught the crowds from there. A couple of weeks ago, I talked about the topography around the Sea of Galilee, and this lake's kind of in this hilly area, this mountainous area. So if you're going to do some teaching, it was like this perfect place to teach from because the acoustics were absolutely amazing. And so here's Jesus who's down near the lake, and he's speaking to this large crowd, and this crowd keeps getting bigger, and so he keeps getting pushed back further and further. Now, off to the side, he sees a couple of boats, and so he decides, hey, I'm going to get in one of these boats. And so he gets into one of these boats. It's owned by this guy named Simon. We call him Peter. Jesus changes his name a little bit later on, so I'm going to talk about Peter. It's the same person here. Jesus says, why don't you push off from shore so I can continue to teach this group of people? We're going to find out here in a moment that Peter's actually fished all night. So he's tired, right? He's had a long night at work. He's ready to go home, and here he is. He's untangling these nets. He's fixing these nets. He's probably getting the fish bait off these nets because he's ready just to call it a night or call it a day and begin again in the evening. It's probably very much like you at 4:55 p.m. in your office when you're thinking about the commute, you're thinking about dinner, you're thinking about what you're going to watch on TV, you're thinking about what time you're going to go to bed, and somebody knocks on your door or texts you or sends you an email or a phone call like, hey, man, there's a really important meeting. We need you in 5 minutes. Or, hey, that project that was due next Friday is actually due tomorrow, so we're going to need you to stay after. And you can kind of imagine, well, you don't have to. You probably have all kinds of words going on in your mind at that particular time, right? Because you're ready for this day to be over with. I get the same feeling here for Peter. Like he's just trying to finish up his day. He's tired. He's worn out. He just wants to go home. And here's this guy who jumps in his boat. He's like, hey, I want you to take me out so I can use your boat to teach. Wonder what Peter's thinking right now. Like one of the things I ask you to do when you read scriptures, don't just read it just to read it. Like put yourself into the story. Like put yourself into the place of the people that we're reading about. Put yourself into Peter's position right here. You're probably thinking about this guy who just jumped in your boat. Like, who are you? Like, what are you doing in my boat? I just want to go home. I just want to get my jacuzzi tub and take a bath. I just want to order takeout, Chinese takeout, and eat it. That's all I want to do. I don't want to work overtime. And now you're making me work overtime. But what does Peter do? He obliges. He gets in the boat. He pushes off a little bit from shore so Jesus can teach a little longer. Look at verse 4. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, now go out where it's deeper and let down your nets to catch some fish. You ever notice in our culture today that everybody's an expert in everything? Like people have something that they're actually an expert in, but they know everything else too. Like everybody knows who really shot JFK. Everybody knows all the inside information about the moon landing. Everybody knows about cloud seeding. Everybody knows about what really happened at the end of The Sopranos. Like you got friends like that? Like you get really deep. They can even tell you their thoughts on the parliamentary representative democratic monarchy of the nation of Tuvalu, right? Like these people just seem to know everything. And it's like the norm today. People are just experts at everything. I say that because when we read this part here, here's Jesus who's telling Peter, hey, you want to catch some fish? I got an idea. Go a little deeper and drop your nets down. Again, put yourself in Peter's position. You're like, wait, hold up. Like I'm an expert at fishing. This is what I do for a living. This is how I make money. I'm the professional fisherman here. And what do you do for a living? Oh, you're a teacher. Oh, but you know everything about fishing. You kind of feel this tension here, especially when we go to this next verse. Look at the beginning of verse 5. Master, Simon replied, we worked hard all last night and didn't catch a thing. Little side note here. Have you ever noticed how Peter never catches any fish in the fishing stories we find in Scripture? Maybe that's why he had a rough night. I don't know. But here's Jesus telling the expert fisherman, hey, why don't you go a little bit deeper? Then put your nets out, and there you're going to catch some fish. That's the first part of this response, right? He's kind of questioning Jesus in many ways. It feels like he's even rebuking Jesus for what Jesus is saying. But look at the last part of verse 5. But If you say so, I'll let the nets down again. You kind of feel like these internal wheels are spinning for Peter. On the one hand, he says, hey, Jesus, I know what I'm doing. This is what I do every single day of my life. But if you're telling me to do this, then I'm going to do what you say. Why does Peter say yes to Jesus' request? Part of me wonders, was he afraid of the crowd? Right, there's this big crowd that is there, and it says here, based on what we can tell, Jesus finishes teaching the crowd, and there's no time lag between that to the point of where he tells Peter, hey, go put your nets out a little bit deeper and you're going to catch some fish. So there's no time lag there. So this crowd, more than likely, is still kind of there, right? They haven't fully dispersed, and so they're probably still watching Jesus to see if Jesus is going to do anything kind of cool and amazing. And they may hear this conversation that's going on and wonder what Peter's going to do. So Peter might feel this fear, like there's a lot of people here watching. I don't want them to like me or not like me or to think something different about me or bad about me. Maybe because they're watching, then I'll do exactly what this Jesus guy says. Maybe he's desperate for money. He's got debts to pay. Maybe he's got to pay off these 2 boats. Maybe he's got a mortgage. Maybe he's got college loans. Maybe the county just assessed his home again and the assessment jumped up dramatically. He's like, I don't know how I'm going to pay my taxes and I got to catch more fish. We don't really know, but maybe this has just been a really tough year for him financially. And Peter's trying to figure out, how am I going to pay for all this? Well, this guy is saying something. Maybe I'll listen. Or maybe he's seen Jesus before. There's a pretty good chance that he has seen Jesus there in this particular town. And there's a good chance that he's heard about Jesus before. But remember, he's there fixing his nets, cleaning his nets. Jesus is teaching to this crowd. And so Peter's probably listening a little bit while he's working. And for him, he's like, wow, there's definitely something different about this guy. Maybe I should do what he says. Now, whatever the reason is here, Peter kind of pushes back a little bit. But then Peter says, sure, whatever you ask me to do, I will do it. Well, what happens? Look at verse 6. And this time their nets were so full of fish, they began to tear. The shout for help brought their partners in the other boat, and soon both boats were filled with fish and on the verge of sinking. So Peter does what he's told. He goes out a little bit deeper. He drops his nets. The nets are so full, they begin to rip. Good thing that they were fixing them a little bit earlier, right? And then he calls out to the other boat and is like, hey, you guys need to come out here and you need to help me. And there's so many fish in both of these boats that both began to sink. Leon Morris wrote this in his commentary on Luke about this verse. He says, but clearly the catch was abnormal. It was not to be explained along the usual lines of fishing techniques. I read that. I was like, do you think, Leon? Right? I mean, yeah, exactly. Now, Leon's very smart and way, way smarter than me. But what he's doing here, he's acknowledging, like, there's a miracle that takes place. It's not some fishing techniques. And I've read some places that have talked about, Jesus just saw the school of fish and was like, hey, why don't you put your net there and it's going to happen. Like, this is a miracle that takes place here. And Peter's a part of it. And I'm sure in that moment, Peter's like, this is the best day ever, right? Best day ever. We're going to make so much money. No one's going to believe this story. But look at Peter's response to, I think, this excitement. Verse 8. When Simon Peter realized what had happened, he fell to his knees before Jesus and said, "Oh Lord, please leave me. I'm such a sinful man." For he was awestruck by the number of fish they had caught, as were the others with him. His partners, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, were also amazed. Verse 9 there uses this term, awestruck. When we see that word awe, maybe we think about what we kind of witness if we go to a college basketball game or a college or an NBA game or WNBA game. They do these halftime shows. Maybe you've seen this lady before, Red Panda. She's pretty amazing. She rides this unicycle out in the middle of the court. She takes these bowls and she flips them on top of her head. I mean, I think I've seen her once, and it's absolutely incredible. By the way, prayers for her. She had a tumble a couple of weeks ago doing this, and she's the goat of halftime shows, in my opinion. But she hurt her wrist real bad, so she's out for a little bit. But when we think awe, this is kind of what we think, right? Wow, amazing, incredible. When we see that term awe in Scripture, that's not what it's talking about. It's talking about terror. It's talking about this incredible fear. So Peter's response is interesting. He's just had this biggest catch that I'm guessing he's ever had in his life. And it doesn't say he goes to count his fish. It doesn't say that he goes to figure out how much money he's made. It says he goes to Jesus, falls on his knees, and confesses he's a sinner. Why? Because he's afraid of who Jesus really is. The guy who just a few minutes ago perturbed him by getting in his boat. The guy just a few minutes ago told him how to fish, even though he's the expert fisherman here. Like Peter realized this guy, Jesus, is way more than anything he had ever thought. And so there's this fear that Peter has. Part of the reason we know this is we can look at the way that Peter addresses Jesus. If we go back there to verse 5, Peter calls Jesus master. Now, in those days, this was kind of a common title to call someone, and you would call someone this if they had some position of authority. So Peter's there while Jesus is teaching to this large group of people, and for him, he's probably thinking, hey, this guy's special. He has authority here, right? He's a teacher. People are listening, and so there's this power that Jesus has over these people in some ways, right? So you would call people like that, you would call them this master. But here in verse 8, calls him Lord. Totally different title. And you would only use this when someone was divine. When you saw something in someone that was otherworldly, and Peter sees this here with Jesus, like this isn't just some teacher, right? He has the power to do incredible miracles. This person is very divine. And so Peter's saying, because of who you really are, like Jesus, I'm not worthy to be in your presence because of who I am. What's Peter's sin? I mean, we don't know. Maybe it was anger, right? He was angry that Jesus jumped in his boat when he was trying to go home. Maybe it was doubt. When Jesus said, hey, why don't you go out a little bit deeper and catch some fish? Peter's got all this doubt in his mind. Maybe Peter's having a hard time with God. Maybe Peter's been praying to God for direction and guidance and help. And God's not answering the prayer the way Peter wants, or he doesn't feel like God's answering the prayer at all. So for Peter's really struggling with God. And it could be something very different than any of those. We don't know. But what we do know is that because of Jesus and Peter's life, Peter's future has been changed forever. And by the way, not just his, but his partners, James and John, too. Look at Jesus' response to Peter in verse 10. Jesus replied to Simon, don't be afraid. From now on, you will be fishing for people. Again, kind of an interesting response from Jesus to Peter here. We've got Peter's fear, right? He's awe. There's this fear. There's this terror. And here we go again. We see a phrase that we see throughout the scripture, right? As we read it. Do not be afraid. Do not fear. Here's Jesus saying, hey, look, don't be afraid of me. Now, what I want you to do is to follow me. I want you to follow me. I want you to walk alongside of me as we live out God's mission here. I want you, Peter, I want you to change who you are. I want you to live a different life than you have. Your fishing days, they're done. And now I've got something else for you to do. Here's my question for all of us. Is it time for you to change and live differently than you have? Is it time for you to change and live differently than you have? I want to dig a little bit deeper into this question. I really want to talk about this on a spiritual level. How many of you have purchased really expensive exercise equipment before? All right, like a treadmill, elliptical, Thigh Master, whatever it is. I'm just kidding about the Thigh Master, but if you're real young, you're like, I have no clue what you're talking about. Don't go look it up, by the way. Anyway, so you got this really important. Now, let me ask you this backup or this secondary question. That how many of you now have a really expensive piece of exercise equipment that you hang clothes on all the time? Anybody? Yeah. Like what happened? Because one day you looked at yourself or you felt a certain way, like, I got to change. I got to do something different. And so I'm going to buy this equipment. I'm going to get this bike. I'm going to get this treadmill. I'm going to get the Peloton. And I'm going to work out. And so you do. You jump on it and you work out. And you're doing this really hard for maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 5 weeks. Every single day, you're on that piece of equipment. You're giving it everything you've got. You're sweating. You're starting to see a little bit of difference. And then life happens. Right? You get home from work and you got more work to do. Maybe you start traveling. If you've got kids, they've got a schedule. Maybe your calendar's changed. Maybe you're just tired at the end of the day from work, or maybe you're just tired from taking care of the kids all day, and you're just like, I can't do it anymore. So you walk past that equipment every day with all the clothes hanging on it, and you say to yourself, someday I'll get back on that equipment to get in shape. You know, that term someday, I think, is one that we use a lot in our lives. Someday I'll pay off my debt. You know, someday I'll set a budget. Someday I'll change my spending habits. Someday I'll take a financial class. Someday. Or maybe it's someday I'll work on my addiction. Someday I'll go to therapy. Someday I'll get into a program. Someday I'll change. Someday. Or someday I'll work on my marriage. Someday I'll make it a priority. Someday we'll go to counseling together. Someday. As you kind of think about your life, what's your someday? What is that thing in your life that you keep saying someday to? Maybe it's debt. Maybe it's addiction. Maybe it's marriage. Maybe it's a broken family relationship. Maybe it's your mental health. What is it that you keep saying someday to? Now, by the way, someday always begins with good intentions, right? Like we walk past that exercise equipment and we're like, hey, someday I'm going to do this. I'm going to make sure. And we've got good intentions. We want to do it. We want to fix this. We want to change this about ourselves. But we keep saying someday. There's no action behind these intentions that we have. And what do we know? When we don't act on those good intentions, oftentimes there are negative consequences. You've probably heard this quote before. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. It means good intentions are worthless without action. We can have the best intentions, but if we don't act on those intentions, then that leads us to nowhere good. Someday I'll get to it. Someday I'll change. Someday I'll fix this. So you go to the doctor one day, and the doctor says, look, we've been talking about this for years, and you've never taken these steps that I've been talking to you about, and so I don't have anything else I can do for you. Or you're sitting at the table one evening, and your spouse hands you the divorce papers and says, look, I've been talking about you how we've got to get counseling. We've got to work on our marriage, and this has been years in the making, and you haven't taken that step. You keep saying, someday we'll do this, and now here are these papers. This marriage is over with. Like there's consequences, negative consequences, so often when we continue to say someday. And when that moment comes, when someday actually happens, we see the consequences that are there, and we ask ourselves, why did I wait? Right? Why did I keep saying someday? I should have fixed this. I should have changed this. I should have done something different a long time ago. There's good intentions, but they're never the actions that go along with it. And so when someday wins, there are consequences that we pay. And right now you're sitting there thinking, that's really good. But what connection is there between that and this guy named Peter and these fish? All right, I'm glad you asked. Listen to this. I'm going to go back to verse 10 because I believe verse 10 is a pivotal moment in this whole story. Jesus replied to Simon, don't be afraid. From now on, you'll be fishing for people. This is the moment Jesus invites Peter to follow him, right? This is a moment he says, hey, leave all your past behind, leave the fishing job, your career, your relationships, and come and follow me. We're going to live out God's mission together. Peter has a whole lot to think about in that moment. Like he's just had a terrible night of fishing, right? Didn't catch a thing. And now all of a sudden he's got two boats that are full, that are sinking because there's so much fish in them. He's got to be thinking about how much money he's going to make doing this. I mean, this is a huge payday for him. Peter could have said, hey, Jesus, appreciate the offer. Like, you seem like a nice dude. I mean, people seem to love the messages that you give. You do a really good job. I mean, look at all the people that were here today to listen to you. I really appreciate that, and I kind of get a little bit of what you're talking about here. But right now, whew, like I'm really busy. I got to count all these fish. And then I got to figure out how much I'm going to get paid for all of these fish. And then I'm going to go home, and I'm going to take a bath in a pile of money that I've made from these fish today. I'm going to pay off my debt. I'm going to plan a vacation for our family to the south of France. I'm going to remodel our house. I'm going to throw a sweet bar mitzvah for my kid. All sounds great. And someday I'll change. Someday I'll follow you. Not today, but someday. This is what Peter could have said in this moment where Jesus says, come and follow me. He could have said, not now, Jesus, but someday. But that's not what Peter does, right? Look at verse 11. As soon as they landed, they left everything and followed Jesus. As soon as they landed, they left everything and followed Jesus. Peter's like, I want to change. I want to be different. I don't want to live the life that I've been living. Jesus, I want what you have to offer me. And so he does. He drops his career. He drops his business. He drops some relationships. All of this to do one thing, to follow Jesus. You and I can keep saying, someday I'll fix this. Someday I'll change that. But so often, we never do we? We just keep saying someday over and over and over again. And I find that we probably say this more often when it comes to our spiritual life than maybe any other part of our life. Do you want to change? Do you want to be different? Do you want to live the life that God intended for you? And you might sit there and say, yes, of course. You may have these really great intentions to take those next steps, but when there's no action behind it, again, there's those negative consequences that come with it. And we just keep saying someday over and over and over again. And so I want to spend the rest of my time talking to two groups of people, which actually is going to take care of all of us in this room, and this idea of someday when it comes to following Jesus. Let me start with those of us that follow Jesus, that say, hey, we're a follower of Christ. My experience with Christians is that Christians love to use the word someday. Like, I'm afraid it might be one of our favorite words. We're like, yeah, I'm a follower of Jesus, and someday I'll work on my bitterness. And someday I'll work on my anger. And someday I'll work on my broken relationships. And someday I'll work on my marriage. And someday I'm going to work on help my neighbor. Someday I'll stop posting hate-filled crap on social media. Not today, but someday I'll do that. Or maybe for some of us, it's like, yeah, I follow Jesus, but someday I'll make church a priority. Someday I'll serve. Someday I'll give. Someday I'll jump into a group. But right now, really busy. Got kids and they got stuff going on and we're traveling. And for me, church is my weekly hour that I just get to be by myself and do my thing. I can't get connected today, but someday I will. Here's my thought on this. If you're a follower of Christ, someday should not be a part of your lexicon, right? I don't think someday should be a word that we use. We're called to be different. We're called to live a different life. We're called to live a changed life, a transformed life. And so if you're a follower of Jesus, one of the things we have to do is stop saying someday to Jesus and start being like Peter and saying, yes, Jesus, I'll follow you. Now, you might be saying, like, why is this important? Chad just wants us to come to church and to give and to be in a group and to show up on Sunday mornings. Like, I think you're missing something if those aren't a priority in your life, but it's much bigger than that. I want you to think about this world. What would this world look like if those of us that call ourselves followers of Christ stop saying someday? I bet there would be less hunger in our world. I bet there would be medical care available to more people. I bet there would be less tension when it comes to caring for immigrants. I bet there'd be less divorce, less abuse, less financial woes. There'd be less anger, less hate, less murder, less gossip, less suicide, less loneliness. Like, I got this feeling that if those of us who say we're Christians stop saying someday, our world would actually be a much better place than it is right now. And we say, hey, I'm a follower of Jesus. And yet at the same time, we keep saying, someday, Jesus, I'll follow you, but not today. I want you to think about Peter. Peter says, yep, I will follow you, Jesus. And he does. And how does God use Peter, right? If you think about Peter's story, you go to the book of Acts, what does God do with Peter? Well, Peter becomes sort of the beginning point, the catalyst for the church. One day he's like, I think I'm supposed to preach to this big group of people. And he does. And 3,000 people come to follow Jesus that day because of what Peter says. And then a little bit later on in the book of Acts, we find that Peter is sent out by God to go to the Gentiles, people who weren't Jewish. Up until that point in time, the Christian or the following Jesus was all for people who were part of the Jewish faith. God's like, that's not how this is going to work, right? This is more than this. This is for the world. And so God sends Peter to the Gentiles, and he's the first one who shares the story of Jesus with the Gentiles. Why? All because Peter says, I'll follow you. What if Peter said someday? Hey, Jesus, this is all good, but someday I'll do this. We never know anything about Peter, would we? Now, God would have found somebody else who would have said, yep, I'm in, but we've never known anything about Peter. If Peter had said someday, in that moment when Jesus says, I am asking you to follow me. Here's my thought for those of us who follow Jesus. What would happen if you stopped saying someday? And so I'm going to give you this challenge today as you head out this week. I want you to pick one thing in your life that's your someday. What's this one someday you have that you struggle with? And this week, not only name what that thing is, but then take an action step towards getting away from someday. And I don't know what that may be for you. There's so many different somedays that we have. But see how God will use you through that. See how God will change you and transform you when you're saying, hey, I want to really follow Jesus in this and not keep saying someday. And then see how God works through you in the lives of others. Okay? So that's for those of us who follow Jesus. Let me talk to the rest of you here who are maybe beginning your spiritual journey, because I think for you keep telling Jesus someday also. Like, you want to change, you want to be different, you want a different life than you have right now, but you keep saying someday. Here you are, disappointed, feeling empty, feeling lonely, feeling lost. My question is, do you really want to change? Do you want to find peace in your pain? Do you want to find joy in your struggles? Do you want to find hope in your tears? Do you want to live the life that God has created you to live? Do you want to change? Like, you may have great intentions. Like, I'm going to do these things, and I'm going to take this step, and I'm going to follow Jesus. And yeah, that's just what it is. It's just these really good intentions that never have any action behind them. And I will tell you, there's negative consequences when we don't fully follow Jesus. When we don't take those next steps in our life. Now, we could make excuses, and maybe some of us do. Like Peter could have done on that particular day. Like, I'm too busy. I'm having too much fun. What would my family think? What do I think? Like, there's this internal tension that we face, and so we keep saying someday. You've got these really good intentions, but you're not taking that first step. And so maybe for you, it's taking that first step. Maybe it's time to stop saying someday to Jesus and actually encounter Jesus in your life. Today, during the first service, we had a baptism. And here in just a little bit, there's a bunch of people just got up a second ago, and you're like, oh, they didn't like I was talking about someday. They're actually doing baptism stuff, right? I know when that happens, people are like, what did he say? Did I miss something? No, we got two people that are going to be baptized here in a little bit, and you guys get to experience that with them, which is pretty amazing thing. But let me say this. On August 10th, we have a baptism Sunday. We have a group of people that are getting baptized on that day. If you'd like to do that, or if you've got questions about baptism, Joel's doing a baptism class next Sunday. You can sign up through the QR code or through our app. But I'm going to throw this out, okay? And I rarely do this. Maybe you're here today and you're thinking, well, the 10th sounds great. Wonderful. Sign up for that. But maybe you're here and you're like, today sounds even better. Like, all I ever do is say someday, someday, someday. Maybe today's the day. You're like, nope, today is the day. Here in just a little bit, I'm going to lead us through communion. And as we come to the end of that communion time, Joel's going to be over here. Come up here and just say, hey, Joel, I want to get baptized. And we'll dunk you in your clothes, all right? We got towels. We actually got some clothes that you can have and change into so you can go home dry. And then you can go get some summer treats to celebrate, right? But maybe that's the place you're at right now. That you can say, hey, I got to stop saying someday. And I need to take this spiritual step today. I hope and pray that all of us in this place will stop saying someday. That we can live the life that God has intended for us to live, whether we're a follower of Jesus or whether we're taking those first steps. Then we can say, hey, Jesus, I'm going to do everything I can to follow you. Not someday, but right now.